Well, hello, hockey fans. Welcome back to the Hockey Writers Live. Thursday, April the 29th, already the last Thursday in the month of April. Like, where's the season gone? Weather's starting to get warmer, starting to get ready for the playoffs. But if you follow the OHL, well, we were waiting for a season. Now it's no more. So I figured this would be the perfect time to bring in one of the best reporters out there who is all over the pulse of the OHL, writes for the Kitchener Record, obviously covers the Kitchener Rangers. We welcome Josh Brown to the Hockey Writers Live. Hello, Josh.
Hey, Mark, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you too. Just how are things going with you?
Good. Good, I guess. I keep been busy writing a lot of other stuff. It was nice to get a dose of OHL news today with the draft. It felt like getting back into the swing of things for a change and something positive after so much negativity for the last 13 months.
Can we even begin to describe, Josh, just how disappointing it is for everybody that they were never able to get this thing off the ground?
Yeah, I think everybody was hopeful all along, but I don't know. I don't want to speak for everyone. I speak for myself. I think there was always this nagging part of me at the back of my head.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't going to happen. Up in Canada here, it's been pretty grim. We've been in lockdown multiple times, and it just didn't seem like there was any light at the end of the tunnel. And you could just sense that summer was coming, and if it wasn't going to happen by now, it was never going to happen. So definitely disappointing, because you look at the other leagues in Canada and the Q and the W, and obviously some teams in the States and W, and the USHL, the NCAA, all sorts of junior leagues in Europe. As I seen, like every league in the world at a junior level was playing but the O. I think that compounded the frustration for a lot of fans, players, coaches, both parents, everybody involved, media as well. Though I don't like to be a big defender of the OHL, but I will say I truly believe that this wasn't some sort of organized thing to not get the season going to save money. You hear rumors like that or on Twitter and social.
Yep.
I mean, they had two dates that they announced, three if you include the beginning of the season, where they were planning to come back, and just wasn't in the cards with the way the protocols were here in Ontario. So I don't doubt that they were wanted to. Hard to get back. Everybody wanted it to happen. It just wasn't safe in the end.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of where I was going to go next. For those that are outside of Ontario, I mean, you guys are right in the middle of it there. Is it as simple as just just trying to find the protocols, trying to find, and it just ultimately ended up being the virus was just too much to overcome with all the lockdowns and everything else going on?
Yeah, well, ultimately it comes down to, I think the O would have created their own bubble back at a heartbeat if they didn't have to get permission. I mean, it had to get signed off by public health, it had to get signed off by the government, and moreover, then it had to go to the city level. So even if the provincial public health deemed it okay, your municipal level, like who run the facilities for a lot of these teams, they would have had to sign off on it to let people back in. I don't think they wanted to be liable on any potential COVID case. So there's so many hoops to jump through, and they all never lined up equally. The Quebec, the QMJHL, it was a different story out in the Maritimes in Canada. Like, they were hard at getting any COVID early on.
Yeah.
Hard time now, but early on, I mean, it was like wasn't even a big problem compared to other parts of the world. So it was a little more manageable there. Here, it just never cleared up to the point for a sustained amount of time where they could get back.
That's just unfortunate too, because some players were able to go out to Europe and play, others weren't, and I think at the end of the day we just feel really bad for the players that we're waiting to hopefully get the season get going, and now they're not. Just from what you've talked around to your people, could you just how disappointed are the management, the players, that they just couldn't finally get this thing off?
I think everybody was miserable about it, and rightly so. I mean, talking to players, I was always regularly doing updates for the paper and website from last March until now. So I've had a pretty good pulse, at least on the local guys from around here and players who play for the Rangers. And every time they were devastated. One guy said it was like an emotional roller coaster, because you would get to a point where they would start to hear rumors that it was coming back, and they'd start to get so excited, and it was just get crushed when it didn't happen. For the fan bases, I mean, some of these teams were built to win, and 2 years ago, and then this year, realize that. And those are 3-4 year long plans in the making, aim to peak at a certain time, and then that window closes, and you're kind of back to square one and rebuild. And then when it comes to even just the teams, like I know from I don't want to speak for every team, but I think it's safe to say the majority of them had to lay people off or furlough employees. That's
Yep.
no one wants to lose their job in this. They're losing big time money, and there isn't really an alternative revenue. Like you look at some of the things teams are doing. I mean, Barrie is selling meals online, trying to get people to come to the rink to buy food to eat at home. I mean, it's desperation mode for a lot of clubs to try to do whatever they can to make some dough. So overall, there was not much. Well, I guess there was really nothing positive about the last 13 months.
And safety, you can argue, of course, safety would be the biggest priority. And I think that's what a lot of people are going to say. But yeah, the business end of it, I mean, that's kind of where I was going to go next too, Josh. I mean, there was some word out there that some teams are going to be okay. They're going to be able to come back and operate. You know, the league recently in the call said that they expect every team to be able to play next season. But I can only imagine some teams are in real trouble here. Could we start to hear stories, or at least rumors, that some of these teams are going to think about maybe relocating or being sold or anything like that? I mean, is it that desperate in some cases in your mind?
I don't know. I'm a kind of mixed opinion on that. Like most of the teams are owned by individual wealthy people who I think can sustain the brunt of the break so far. There are some clubs that are the exception to the rule where the amount of money they can make is capped in smaller locations. That's, I don't think, nobody wants to lose money. So it's just because, they're millionaires and it's not the biggest deal for them maybe as is compared to the average Joe, doesn't mean that it's hurting them. Relocation would be tough because where are you going to go? Like they're already in pretty much some of the biggest markets that they can get to. There's not really much option out there to go somewhere new. So I don't see it happening. It's nice to see that all 20 teams are supposed to be coming back. And I really feel that shouldn't be a problem if we can get back in the fall. At some point, the league's got to have a war chest, from all the TV rights and the money they get from different tournaments and things like that you think could maybe help some of these clubs out. And the OHL isn't too does talk a lot about that, though they are just coming off a big lawsuit settlement as well. So not a great time as far as building up the coffers are concerned.
Jump in the next question with you, Josh. So just think about some of the players too. Like I think about Kitchener, like Francisco Pinelli is obviously going to be a high pick. And there's a lot of examples that we can go up and down here. How affected are players like that going to be in your mind, knowing that they didn't have a chance to play and develop and stuff like that? And what could we possibly see, in an NHL draft with players like that who've been affected?
Oh, well, a guy like Pinelli, at least he went to Europe, so at least he got to get some action and he played against men. So he was probably pushed a bit harder maybe than he would have been. So I think he was telling me he was one of the guys on his team was near his almost 40. So there's like a double age gap going on there. But for the most of the guys, it's a lost year. I mean, they can work out, and they were. Every guy I talked to was constantly working out, skating. Some of them were doing kind of scrimmages, 3-on-3 scrimmages, depending on the numbers they can squeeze in. But we know that's not the same as the game. The line I keep hearing from every team is that, everybody was in the same boat. So at least it's not like somebody in the OHL anyway. It's not like a group of players were getting ahead of you as far as league play goes. Yep. But for the draft, it's a different animal. I mean, you had guys in other junior leagues not playing a full season, but playing regularly. That said, the best players are the best players. I know a lot of scouts I talk to when I travel around covering the Rangers and at the Odd here in Kitchener. They are primarily looking at the draft class that they're focused on, but the good ones always are looking a year down as well. So they would have seen some of those guys and good looks at the guys who are expected to go high, who everybody knows about anyway. It's kind of those dark horses that are going to lose the most, in my opinion. The guys who needed this year to show that they could break out, that they had elevated their game, or that they'd been passed over and looked over in years gone by and maybe re-enter the conversation. That happens to a lot of players, especially OAs who come back for that year and really cement themselves, take a leap. They're just a bit of a late bloomer maybe. They're not going to get not just the draft, but a lot of those guys would get rookie camp invites or tryouts with AHL teams, things like that. And they're not being seen those opportunities out the window with the way the state of the game in the NHL right now, with them not playing a full season and without fans here in Canada. the dollars aren't there. I was talking to the director of scouting for Dallas Stars, and he was saying, the dollars just aren't there to offer a lot of contracts to players they would have in the past. So those guys are losing big time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said there. I was encouraged to hear that some of the players, I think they're going to get like their scholarships and stuff like that. Is that correct, Josh?
So the OHL teams are all honoring this year as a full play year. So you typically what you get is a year of school for every year you play in the OHL. Now some guys sign better deals when that guarantee them their schooling whether they play or not. But every year gets a year towards their schooling covered. But of course, in Ontario, each team got I think it was 140 grand or something like that from the government to contribute toward that. So it would look pretty poor if they didn't honor that after getting a handout from the government.
Absolutely. Josh Brown from the Record in Kitchener joining us here. Just got a few more for you and just kind of want to get your take on a couple of possible ideas here, especially a lot of talk about should they honor or change the rules around overage players given the last year? I guess I'll start there. Do you feel like that the league should at least explore extended eligibility since there was a lost year, or do you don't think they're going to go there?
Well, first of all, I want to say for the overagers, I feel for them, and I think that I wish that they could have a season. I think they got robbed, but I just don't see any scenario where this could happen. You're going to have if they do allow you to bring back this year's OAs, you could have 22-year-olds playing against 16-year-olds. Moreover, I think if you haven't announced it by now, most of the guys we're only 4 months away from potential start of a season at any level.
Mm-hmm.
But these guys are moving on to in a lot of cases, Canadian colleges or minor pro or Europe. They're already, the wheels are in motion already. They don't really have time to kind of decide they want to get on with their life. And a lot of them already have. Most of them have committed. And then that would be pretty mean to burn the school you've committed to at this stage. Plus, the biggest thing is, I think, I don't know if you were on the call with Dave Branch or not, but he made a point of, and this was the call to announce that the season was ending. It was rather long. Reporters asked a ton of questions. One of the themes I kept hearing was that, we're still the number one developmental league for junior players. And he kept kind of hammering that over and over again. And that's been no secret. That's been the OHL's mantra for years. And it is, in my opinion. But you can't call yourself that and then bring back old guys at the expense of ice time for younger players. You have a cohort from last year that didn't even play. Yep. Draft is in June. They just announced today the draft's coming up this year. You're going to have a whole other class from that draft. Where are these guys going to get ice time? These are the future stars of your league that you want to hang your league on when they start ripping it up. And you got right. You're going to sit him so you can play a guy who's 22 and maybe a bit of a journeyman. It just seems like a weird message to be sending young people, especially if you want to attract the best players in the league. I think they'll start looking elsewhere if they're not going to get the ice time. And so I just don't, unfortunately for them, they've kind of been a bit of their seasons have been sacrificed this year because of the way things went. I have a hard time seeing it happen.
Josh, I'm curious too about your take on the current state of the Nhl CHL agreement. This year, seeing players being able to jump into the AHL because their OHL teams never came back, and there's always been talk about, should they amend the rule? Do you feel like that will finally get to a point where there might be changes to that? I mean, I know that the OHL has always, sat on that rule just to be able to have, some of their stars not leave all the time like that. So just where do you think this goes?
I think it stays the same. I don't know what the benefit is for the NHL. Like the handful of guys who might make an impact on your team. I'm not sure if granting them access at the expense of losing a ton of other players who won't, I don't think necessarily get the development that they would in the OHL if they're young guys playing against men. You want your guys playing all situations, tons of minutes, all sorts, power play, special teams, getting a playoff run, learning what it's like to lead, and then taking that to the next level. I just wonder how much of that gets lost if you throw a bunch of young guys into the AHL or ECHL, if they're allowed to go. Plus, it goes to what you said, and what I always say is, this is, the OHL loves its stars, and that's how you market your league. If you've got Connor McDavid in Erie, you've got the world paying attention to your league. If he's in the ECHL or AHL for a year or two and you lose that, that's a big hit for your league as a whole. Plus, you know,
Definitely.
goes on and everybody runs to the ring to go and see him and buy tickets and all that stuff too. So
Yep.
I don't see that happening unless the NHL really does some sort of a strong arm tactic and says it's this way or no way, and they can't really reply to it. But I don't know how that would benefit the NHL.
I agree with you on that for sure. Hey, let's actually talk about some news. I mean, we kind of alluded to it at the beginning here. The OHL draft is been announced for June 4th and 5th, but it's going to be a lottery format, kind of like 05 in the NHL when everyone had the same chance to get Sidney Crosby. Just, are we surprised that it came to this, that we're dealing with this type of a lottery situation in the way it's going to also be a snake draft as well? So just when you saw that, what did you think?
I thought it was awesome. Like you know, it's been so long where everything that's come out from the OHL has had a negative tone to it, not entirely by their fault. And to have something finally that's like an excitement, I think the league needs more of this. I wish they would trumpet a lot of and try new things, or you know, share the news about how they were returning more, so we could, you know, get excited about it. But this is the draft's going to be a lottery. Obviously, the teams didn't play last year, so there's no standings. They can't go worst to first like they normally do. So everybody has a shot at that number one pick, and I think you want it because it's going to be a snake draft. So you know, I guess you could have 2021, but the problem is that most teams have traded their second round picks over the years. They don't own their actual pick anymore, so they're not going to necessarily, you know, be there at 21. So I think you want to get an early pick. And again, this is going to be cool because it's going to be on YouTube, and you know, it'll be like a live. I don't know if they're going to do ping pong balls or how it's going to work, but it'll be exciting to watch and see who can get it. I don't kid you, like they haven't had the number one pick since 1980, so it's been 41 years that they haven't had a first overall pick. They took Brian Bellows that year, who ended up, you know, obviously being one of more a couple of the team and turned into an NHL superstar. I think it's awesome. I think it's going to really also show the depth of your scouting and how well your guys scout, because with no hockey to see, you might be able to score some late round gems if you've really done your homework. And you know, this might be a good way to get some guys in. It would have gone a lot higher had there been hockey.
And that's a great point. I'll just add something real quick before getting to the last question about scouting. I was talking to Dave Brown, with the general manager of the Otters, and he admitted that he's going to lean on his scouts a lot, who did a lot of homework early. Like they started real early on scouting a lot of team players, and they're going to really depend on that knowledge in this draft. And I'll be curious to see, to your point, who did the homework and who put the work in. And it's really going to show. I think it's going to be true in the NHL. It's going to be true in the OHL in a situation like this. Those that put in the work, I think, are going to get rewarded. And there's a possibility there could be a really strong draft class out of it if they did the right thing.
Well, I think you really have to know you really have to know your team makeup too, because you've had 2 years now with no hockey. So you've got to know where holes you need. It's usually easy to know what holes you need to fill, because you just look at the graduating guys, or, you know, where your agents are at. But without having seen last year's guys develop, you're almost not entirely sure what you got. So see who really knows. It's going to show who really knows their team and the guys in their system.
Absolutely. Last one for you, Josh, is the word is that they're aiming for training camps to start Labor Day. Do we feel that that's a realistic target? Are we back to normal? I guess, what are the chances that we're back to normal in and around then for a possible training camp and a possible start of a normal season?
I'd like to say it's going to happen, but I thought hockey would have been back a long time ago. I think it's part of, I guess, you know, my heart says let's go. It's going to be ready to go. My brain's saying it might not be till January or a later start. But I guess the good news is the vaccines in Canada are starting to roll out after a slow start. If that can into the numbers, you know, the next couple months, and this thing here, I don't think we're going to have a problem meeting that timeline. I just feel like it's going to be a little tough because this is a gate-driven league. They need fans, and if fans aren't in the stands, I don't know how much they can go. You know, how much they can go without fans. And maybe they have a plan where they can play the first. You know, they can come back at Labor Day and then kick in September like they normally do, play without fans until mid-November, and then and then it will, fans start coming back. Because I think that's going to be sort of kind of the last thing decided when we can all kind of gather, at least in Canada, in Ontario. But that's
Absolutely.
one thing I want to see. I would love to see the OHL do that. They throughout this whole process, and I think was one of the criticisms that they do deserve, is a better communication. I would love to see. Here are 5 plans: one for if no fans return, one for if 25% of the capacity can be there, one if the season starts in December, one if it starts in February. This is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to entail. I think players, parents, fans, media, everybody would breathe a little easier, wouldn't be so worried and anxious, and would have an idea like, okay, these are the things they're mulling about. Maybe even name the hub cities they were considering, so that we can get excited about stuff again.
Yes.
All this being left in the dark. I understand they're doing it because it's a fluid situation and they don't want to commit to something. But I think we're all mature enough to realize that, like, hey, if you've got 5 plans and things change, it's okay. We're not going to hold you to something that's, changed because of something that's out of your control. And I would love to just get a sense of what we could be in store for it instead of just speculating, to be honest.
Josh, couldn't agree with that anymore. Absolutely. And listen, fans, make sure that you follow Josh all the time at Brown Record on Twitter. Covers the Kitchener Rangers, does a great job with a column that he does, kind of like a 31 thoughts, but I believe it's limited to 21. So do you think it's called the OHL 21? Is that still going to be coming whenever we get a season?
I hope so. Yeah, I've just been kind of doing them once in a while now because there hasn't been much going on. But usually when I get fired up about a bunch of stuff, I throw one out there. And during the regular season, they seem to be on a little bit more regular basis.
No. Well, we really appreciate the insight and your time today, Josh. Thank you very much for joining us in the Hockey Writers Live.
Anytime, Mark. It's great to see you.
Great to see you as well. And fans, stay tuned. Part 2, we're going to continue this discussion with our panel about the state of the OHL. So stay tuned. Well, welcome back to part 2 of the Hockey Writers Live. It is Thursday, April the 29th, and just got off a really good conversation with Josh Brown from the Brown Record in Kitchener, talking about the OHL canceled season, the upcoming OHL draft, and more. So make sure that you review and watch that interview. I mean, you can make sure that you hit that like button on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube. You will never miss a moment of any of our interviews, any of our panelists. There's so much going on here, so we really appreciate you tuning in here. So for our panel today, we're going to continue the OHL discussion. So we brought on 3 of our writers who have a good pulse on the current state of the OHL. So let me just quickly introduce them to you. First off, we have Frankie Benvenuti. Hello, Frankie.
How's it going?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining in. And Hadi Kalakeche is joining us. Hello, Hadi.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm doing good. Thank you. And Matt Cosman also covers the Carolina Hurricanes is joining us. Hi, Matt.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing good. Really, so much to talk about here. I guess we'll just jump right into this. So, Frankie, just when you heard the news that this season was canceled, just what were your initial impressions that the news finally came down was official?
Yeah, I can't really say that I was surprised, really. The fact that we're sitting in, I guess at that point, middle of April, and we hadn't really heard anything. We'd heard from, I'm blanking on the name right now, Lisa McLeod, that we were supposed to have an announcement by the end of March. That didn't happen. We've seen all the return to play plans that I've referenced so frequently in my articles, and just nothing ever seemed to get moving, and nothing ever seemed to be progressing all that well, to be honest with you. So can't say I'm surprised. I mean, I'm disappointed in the communication side of stuff, but it kind of came to a point where you didn't have an option anymore.
Yeah, we talked about that with Josh too, about the communication. They could have done such a better job with that, but hopefully that's a learning experience. Hadi, what did you think when the news came down? Did it surprise you at all?
Well, honestly, I expected it. With things in Canada being the way they are, we've always been quite strict on making sure that we take care of our elders, make sure that, everyone in the community is as safe as possible. So I expected at least, as much delay as possible in the CHL in general's, schedules, be it, the WHL, the OHL, the Q. There were some delays that I expected there, but I didn't expect the OHL to shut down entirely. I thought they would start, at least 15 games of the season like the WHL did, but that didn't end up panning out. So, it is what it is. It's really unfortunate for the prospects that are, at the World 18s right now that are playing their first games of the year. Those players haven't played a game in 14 months for some. So I'm excited to see how they do in these tournaments to see if they can, get right back on track. But it's just clearly going to be difficult.
Yeah. And Matt, final word, what did you think when the news came down?
Well, if you asked me a few months ago, I might have a different answer, but when the news came out, I wasn't surprised at all. I think things were different back in February, and I was kind of hopeful that the season would get on track. At the very least, I thought maybe they could get a bubble going for the two conferences, maybe one in the East, one in the West. In the low-risk towns where they don't have like a lot of COVID cases, I thought it could get done, but it seems like the communication between the Ontario government and the OHL was just off the entire time. And
Yep.
I don't think the Ontario government was very open to having any junior hockey be played. So I think it's a failure on both ends, but yeah, it is what it is, and it's just unfortunate.
That's for 100% sure. So Hadi, I'll start with you on this one. So just different points of the year, you guys kind of made reference to a little bit about the communication. We had different start dates. We thought, some rumors came out that we're going to start, never started. Just how in the world did we get here that it ended up just being canceled? Just seeing that other leagues like the WHL, the QMH, the Q, they were able to get some games in. So how do we get to the point that the O actually had to go through and cancel everything?
Well, I think it was two main points. Mainly, we talked about it already, the communication aspect, being able to vehiculate the information properly to all the teams, make sure that everyone's on the right page in terms of testing, all that. I think the government just saw too many difficulties or predicted too many difficulties with that and decided it wouldn't be safe to put young OHL or 16, 17, 18-year-olds in those circumstances where they could potentially experience something like Marco Rossi went through when he got COVID and got really sick. We don't want these kids getting sick. So I understand the aspect of health, and basically it's just a decision between either protecting your bottom line or protecting your players. And I think different leagues have responded in different ways. Still, again, the fact that players haven't been playing in more than a year, it's going to affect their development for sure. But there's also the health aspect, and we need to keep that in mind.
Matt, just your thoughts on how we got to this point.
The communication was a huge issue. I mentioned earlier about how I think there could have been a playoff bubble type situation for the two conferences. Not even for the two conferences, but if you just split the 20 teams into groups of 4 and have 5 teams per division, I think they could have got something done there. But I think it says a lot that the OHL is one of the only junior leagues in the entire world that was not able to get a season up and running.
It really is. That's such a great point. Frankie, get the final word on just your thoughts on how we got to this point today.
Well, I mean, I think the biggest part of why we're not playing today is literally just the money side of things. Like, we shouldn't sit here and pretend like OHL teams are very affluent at all. We got teams in small communities that struggle to make it by in a regular year. And from the people that I've talked to, like, if they would have played this season, they're not sure that they would have survived anyway. And this might just be the cheapest way for them to get out of this and make sure they have all 20 of their franchises in place when we hopefully get back on the ice in September. And like, that's just the unfortunate fact about playing in a league where a lot of teams are community owned and don't have a ton of cash.
Exactly. Well, Matt, we'll start with you on this next one, and I'm going to ask you all to put your scouting caps on for a minute, because this is going to be a big story as we go along here. And it was alluded to earlier about players who playing their first game in 14 months, if they're playing at the U18s, and others who just haven't played at all. How affected do you think that they're going to be by this, and how quickly do you feel like that they can get back up to speed? Like, I mean, is this going to be something where some players are going to be able to recover right away, others might not ever be able to recover? Just where does that all sit, Matt?
Well, I think it depends a lot on the player. I have no doubt that the players who haven't played a game this season have been working like crazy to just off the ice to get their game where it needs to be, to get their strength where it needs to be. This is obviously a very crucial year in a young hockey player's development. This is the time of year or the time of their lives where your body is changing like crazy. You're evolving into having the kind of strength you need to be able to compete at the NHL level. So I think for the under 18s that's happening right now, I think it's obviously a much needed event a much needed opportunity to see these players and to see if they are as good as we thought they would be a year ago. And the other thing is the players who don't get to play in that tournament, who haven't still seen the ice or seen a competitive game in over a year, how those players will respond and how the GMs will respond to the upcoming draft.
Yeah, Frankie, just your thoughts. Like, how effective will these players be, and how far behind are they that they've lost all this time?
Yeah, I can't see a world where they'd be in any kind of advantage, even with all the work that they would have put in. Like, you can't replace the competitive game time, and to lose an entire year of it. Granted, it's only 24 games against a guy played in the WHL, but those years, like if we look at a guy like Jack Quinn last year, started in the 7th round and then shot his way all the way up to being a top 10 pick. There's going to be guys that just missed that year entirely. Could benefit a team down the road if it's a case like Jack Quinn, but that age 17 season is absolutely crucial in any young player's development. There's no two ways about that.
Yep. And Hadi, give you the final word on just the whole how players will be affected by this and what to watch for.
Well, we already touched on a lot of great points with the amount of games they play, how important it is to get hockey in their system. But I think the main concern for me is just a financial barrier that's just been exacerbated by the pandemic. So let's say I'm an OHL kid, I'm in my draft year and I want to play hockey. The league shut down, I know that. If I'm from a working class family, do my parents have the money to afford to send me to Switzerland or send me to Slovenia to continue my development and get some games in? Or am I stuck in Ontario? And if I am, do I have the same access to equipment, to facilities, to ice rinks as my more affluent colleagues do? It's all these questions that really make me worry about the financial aspect of the pandemic. If your parent's been furloughed and doesn't have a job right now, it's much more likely that she'll have a lot of trouble getting on ice. So there's a lot of things like that I worry about in terms of young kids' development. But the main thing for sure is they haven't had hockey in their system in a year, and that's for sure going to affect their development.
Yeah, well said on that. And just kind of reset it here. If you're just joining us, this is the Hockey Writers Live, and we have our panel of OHL folks joining us: Frankie Benvenuti, Hadi Kalakeche, and Matt Cosman, talking about all things OHL in light of the canceled season. So, Frankie, we're going to get back to you on this one. So, I don't know about you. I feel really bad for the players, especially the overage players that lost their last year of eligibility, and now they're got to move on with their lives, because it just sounds to me like they're not going to have another chance. They're not going to extend eligibility for an overage player. So my question for you is, do you feel like that there should be any kind of changes to the rule, whether it be extended eligibility, whether it be some sort of a change of the CHL NHL agreement about where players can be assigned to? Do you feel like there should be any accommodations in light of the lost season?
Yeah, and I mean, this is something I actually wrote a bit of a piece about, and I came up with this whole solution that in my brain I think works pretty well, where I said that, like, let's expand the overage system to allow for 21-year-olds from each team to play some games, because, like, you just look around, like, the 67s, I believe, lost 6 guys this year that would have been overagers, and for me to have to watch all 6 of those guys go from having fantastic careers in the OHL to being out of hockey entirely potentially, that's hard. For a guy like Mitch Holscher, as an example, to go from being one of the best second line centers in the league to going to play U Sports hockey and then that potentially being it, that shouldn't be happening. It's not fair to them. I think they have to make some kind of exception. It's just a question of how far down the road are you willing to push these things, because if you make an action to the 21-year-olds, all of a sudden that's going to cost a 16-year-old a spot.
Exactly. Hadi, what do you think?
Another point that you mentioned was pushing back the draft might be possible in terms of getting that done. And we know right now that this year, for sure the draft will be in July. That's been confirmed. I think it would have helped, though, to have an extra year just to evaluate these prospects on ice. There's, again, so many guys that haven't touched the ice in a year. So how do you evaluate those guys? How do you compare them? Right now, we've got a couple games here in the U18 Worlds to look at them and see what they've got. But this is just a handful of the guys in the OHL that haven't played a game this year. So especially in the later rounds. I think we'll see a lot less OHL players and WHL players as time goes, because we've just seen so much of the USHL, the Finnish junior prospects, the Swedish junior prospects. Those are being showcased daily. So those are likely the names that'll show up more in these later drafts. I think this year the OHL will see a lot less picks in terms of getting penalized for not just playing at all this year.
Interesting point. Matt, give you the final word on should there be any accommodations or rule changes in the future?
I'm on the side of the fence that I think they should do something to kind of accommodate these older players. You mentioned the agreement between the CHL and the NHL. I think if there's ever an opportunity to experiment, it's this year. And I think what I would like to see is for the 18, 19-year-olds who have been recently drafted by NHL teams, if they're not up to the standard of NHL hockey and they're too good for junior, this is something that's been discussed for years. I think now is the opportunity to put those guys in the AHL, allow each team to have maybe 2 or 3 guys tops that are eligible for AHL level hockey. And that would loosen up things a little bit in the Ontario League. There'd be fewer players in there, not a lot fewer, but enough to maybe bring back these 21-year-old guys if they want to come back. And it might make for some clogged lineups in the OHL, but I mean, that's kind of going to happen anyway.
Absolutely. Still got 2 more questions for the group in general. So Hadi, I'll start with you on this one. So actually have a little bit of news to talk about today. The league officially announced that the OHL draft is happening in the beginning of June over a couple of days, the 4th and the 5th. And we're also going to have not only a draft lottery, an equal weighted draft lottery, but it's going to be done in a snake format. So when you guys heard the news, so just what were your impressions of hearing the news that the OHL draft was going to work out like this?
Well, honestly, in terms of thoughts on that, it's really interesting to see what they're trying to do with equity here. It's clearly an attempt to make sure that there is some sort of equity in terms of the draft picks and how they're allocated. I'm not sure how that's going to play out, though. It's definitely, giving most teams in level playing field, but there's also the draft and development aspect of all this. So you have programs that are simply stronger than others that are just going to churn out better prospects. There's a bunch of factors here that are taken into account. I really like this, though, because we'll see a lot more of a level playing field between teams, and that gives for interesting hockey, especially in the OHL this year.
Matt, what do you think about the news of the OHL draft and the way that it's going to function this year?
Yeah, if you want to talk about equity, I mean, that's probably the best way to do it. I think it's definitely a fun format to kind of have if everything kind of doesn't go haywire and the best teams don't get the first picks. But, anything could happen. I like the snake format, as you mentioned. I think it's fair. And there's really no other way to decide. Like, do you want to give the worst team in the OHL 2 first-round picks or first overall picks? Probably not. So some teams will get lucky, some teams will complain about it, but in the essence of fairness, I think it's okay.
Could you imagine if the London Knights won the first pick?
It also makes me think of the Sidney Crosby sweepstakes from 2005. So I think maybe they could have done it that way. They could have given teams who have historically done well in the playoffs a smaller chance of obtaining a higher pick, but if they want to keep it as simple as possible, that's the way to go.
And what I think will be fascinating too, real quick before we get to Frankie, is that the snake draft, how many teams have traded second round, third round, or other picks? So it's not like you're in a position where, you get 20 and 21. Well, if you trade your second round pick, you're not going to be like that. So, teams are obviously going to be trying to root for getting the highest pick possible and then see where it comes out. And I just think it's going to be super fascinating. So, Frankie, you get the last word on the OHL draft. And just when you heard the news, just what were your impressions of it?
Well, I was very happy. I mean, from the guys I've talked to, I can't really say who they were with, but I think we all know, if you know who I am, they don't want to pick last again. They want to have a chance to pick in the middle of the grid. And for them, like, the team probably wasn't going to be, the 60-win franchise that they had been previously. So to have a chance to kind of maybe able to move up a little bit, I think it's helpful. And, it's going to kind of be a guessing game. If as much as we don't know much about the OHL guys being drafted this year, we don't know really anything about the guys that are being drafted into the OHL now. So it's going to be a crapshoot, if anything.
All right, last question for you guys for the night. Matt, I'll start with you on this one. So just probably a tough question to answer, but just based on what we know right now. So it seems like that the word is they want to get training camps going by Labor Day, the beginning of September, for a possible start of a normal season. Do you feel like that we can get that? Do you feel like that this can be a normal season? Or do you kind of get the sense that we're going to have another delay and we just don't know what's going to happen? Where are you at right now with that?
I think it has to be a normal season. I think they obviously, looking back on how the 2020-21 season was handled, was catastrophic. I mean, there's no other way to put it. So to have that happen twice, and not even a full cancellation, but a delay like starting in January, even that would, in my opinion, be seen as a failure. So I think there's enough time between now and the potential start of next season to work on an agreement, hopefully get enough people vaccinated in Ontario where the numbers go down, and just hope for the best. But I do think it would be seen as a huge failure to not start on time next season.
Frankie, do you agree with that, or how optimistic are you?
Well, I mean, I have to be optimistic, but from a recruitment standpoint, I mean, I think the OHL has spent all this time trying to prove the premier development league in the world. And now you're looking in the rear view, and the gap with the USHL and the NCAA is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. You cannot afford to not have another season. If that happens, I hate to say it, but some of the top talent that would otherwise commit to the OHL might start looking elsewhere. So you simply cannot afford to miss another season.
And how do you give you the final word on the night on just how optimistic are you that they can get going on time?
Well, to pick up on what Frankie was saying, it's really, really important to have players that are willing to come to these leagues and ready to come to them. The only way to do that is to have some sort of regularity. If you constantly have these issues in putting together a season, as Frankie mentioned, these prospects are going to have to look elsewhere for their playing time. I think the NCAA is becoming bigger and bigger. The programs are becoming more numerous, and all of them are becoming generally stronger. It's enticing more and more Canadian talent to go south of the border, and I think the OHL has a strong they have a strong incentive to continue to provide hockey for these young draft eligibles and make sure that they get their games in, because there's a lot of good hockey to play in Ontario. There's a lot of viewership, there's a lot of exposure, but this year was the complete opposite. The league you wanted to go to get seen was either the USHL or the NCAA, because those were the leagues playing the most games. Now, hopefully the OHL gets their stuff back on track and we're able to play a full season next year, because I don't see a circumstance where it's positive to them to have a half season or even a 3/4 season next year.
And I'll just end it by saying, I hope that no matter what happens, that there's a much better job communicating where things are at, what potential plans are in place. Keep everybody in the loop. That just works out to be the best for everybody. It at least limit the frustration trying to figure out what might be next. So hopefully we'll be back to normal as soon as possible. So Frankie, Hadi, Matt, we really appreciate you taking your time to join us here to talk about the state of the OHL and the Hockey Writers Live.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. And just before we wrap it up here, just want to give you fans a couple of reminders. Remember, we're here every week on the Hockey Writers Live. We drop a new episode every Thursday. We have a whole bevy of episodes of other shows that are out there. Have a rumor rundown. We have a couple team-specific shows like the Flames, the Blackhawks, the Sabres, the Maple Leafs, and there are others out there. Make sure you go to the Hockey Writers Live. Make sure you go to thehockeywriters.com and you'll be able to see what shows are currently out there. We have a new feature called the Morning Skate. That's a new thing that's out there now, where every morning you get an email delivered to you with some of the news and some other interesting news that's going on in the world. And then just, again, make sure you hit that like button on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube, and you will not miss anything here. I promise that we're going to have some really good guests coming up down the road here and start to get ready for the playoffs. And we got the draft coming up. The draft guide is already well underway here. We got plenty of profiles going up. So if you're out of the race, you've got plenty of content for you here at the Hockey Writers. So just make sure that you just visit our site and see everything that we have to offer. So thank you very much for joining us tonight, and hope you all have a great day, a great week. And we'll be back here next week, same time here on the Hockey Writers Live.